Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we just voted on Secretary Michael Regan to be the new EPA administrator, and I want to congratulate him on his vote. He's now the new EPA administrator. I sit on the EPW committee, Environment and Public Works Committee, so we had hearings for Mr. Regan, Administrator Regan, I guess we want to call him now, and I've had a number of conversations with him. I actually voted for him to move out of committee, to come to the floor for this vote that we took today. And I'd like to come down the floor and explain my votes, because sometimes I'm supporting the Biden administration's cabinet officials. I've introduced Secretary of Defense Austin at his confirmation hearing. I served with him many years ago when I was a Marine. He was two-star general in the Army. A lot of respect for the Secretary of Defense. And then other times, I'm a no. But what I typically like to do is come and explain the no's. Not always. But on this one, for Secretary Regan, Administrator Regan, his team, I want to explain it. Because I will say I was impressed with him. I think he's qualified. He was essentially the EPA administrator for North Carolina. Both of his Republican senators introduced him at his hearing, voted for him, I believe, today. Good conversations with him as well. But here's the thing, Mr. President, I was trying to get commitments to him. Now, this is very normal in the confirmation process. You work with the nominees, try to get commitments. Sometimes they give them, sometimes they don't. But that's what we do, advice and consent. We've been doing this since the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution on what the Senate should be doing in these confirmation processes that we're going through right now with the Biden administration. So I wasn't asking for a lot, Mr. President, in terms of commitments from this administration for the great state of Alaska. But it was important to me. Why was it important to me? Unfortunately, the Biden administration has launched a war on working families in Alaska. Now, that sounds like a pretty dramatic statement. A war on working families in Alaska. And, Mr. President, what I'm looking for is a ceasefire. A ceasefire. My state, like a lot of states, is hurting economically. We're doing very well. I'm very proud of Alaska on the health side. #1 in terms of vaccinations per capita in the country. Remarkable if you've been to my state. It's so huge. The populations are so spread out. But we're working together, all of us, and we're achieving really remarkable results. #1 on testing per capita throughout the whole pandemic. Some of the lowest per capita death rates throughout the whole pandemic. But we are being really hit hard economically. Energy sector, tourism sector, commercial fishing sector. So why am I looking for a ceasefire? In the first 2 months of the Biden administration, 8 executive orders, if you include the recent statement of the President and the Prime Minister of Canada, which had a focus on Alaska, 8 have been focused on my state. Usually economic development projects, usually access to federal lands. 8! There's no state in the country that is getting that kind of attention from this administration. And we're hurting. Not even close. Show me any other state represented in the U.S. Senate chamber that has 8 executive orders directed at your state. Won't exist. Trust me, my constituents don't like all the attention. And I want to ask the President, not the presiding officer, the President, Mr. President Biden, sir, you were a U.S. Senator for 3 decades. Let me just ask you this question. If a Republican administration came into office and focused its attention on shutting down Delaware with 8 executive orders inside of 2 months, you'd be on the floor every day like me, talking about it, asking for some relief. That's all we're asking for. Ceasefire on the hardworking families of Alaska. So here's what I asked Secretary Regan. a commitment on these were not big issues. And I told him, if I can get a commitment on these things, I'll come down on the floor and give a speech in favor of your confirmation. One was a very big energy project in my state that has been permitted for almost 25 years. Started with the Clinton administration in a place called the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, set aside by Congress for oil and gas development. That's what the NPRA is. We do it responsibly, better than any place in the world. But this is a project started by the Clinton administration, moved forward by the Bush administration, a big NEPA and environmental impact statement by the Obama administration called the Integrated Activity Plan for NPRA, which was approved, completely non-controversial, because that's what this part of Alaska is set aside for. And then the Trump administration finalizes a very large but responsibly developed energy project. Started it this winter. No controversy. Estimates 2,000 direct jobs with thousands of more indirect jobs. All we wanted was a commitment to keep it going. That's it. Simple, status quo. Couldn't get it. Couldn't get it. There's litigation with regard to this project right now. About 200 people, almost 200 workers have been sent home, pink slips during a recession. These are great jobs, by the way. Try to get a commitment on this. Couldn't get it. By the way, 75% of those 2,000 jobs, union jobs. High-paying building trades, laborers, operating engineers, teamsters, great Americans, by the way. 75%. Non-controversial, 25 years of permits. No one has been against this. So I just want a commitment on that. Nope. Like I said, Mr. President, war on working families. Another one. Here's something that's a lot of people don't know about Alaska. 60% of the country's wetlands, of America's wetlands, are in my state. 6-0. Now, we have the most beautiful state. We love our wilderness. We love the outdoors. We care about the Alaska environment more than anyone else. Trust me, more than anyone in the EPA, that's for sure. 175 million acres of wetlands. So this creates challenges. Unlike most of the lower 48, we have not dredged and filled these areas in the past. You look at the East Coast, look at their environments, no offense to some of my colleagues whose states are up the corridor here, holy cow. And you wonder about my environment? Geez Louise. But you can't do compensation for any projects. It's hard to do compensation for projects where you haven't had dredge and fill before because we have so many wetlands. So in 2018, the Corps of Engineers, the EPA, had an MOU to help address some of these mitigation challenges. It wasn't controversial, it was creative. I think Secretary Regan thought it was creative when I talked to him about it. So we just asked for a continuation of this. Again, these are really simple commitments. Good ideas. Couldn't get it from the Secretary. Now look, here's my own view, Mr. President. I think Mr. Regan wanted to. Explain these to him. I think he was reasonable. Someone who's done this in states, knows how each state is unique, cares about jobs, cares about environmental justice. That's a big issue in my state. When a lot of these communities that are getting targeted are actually Alaska Native communities, killing jobs in those communities, that's environmental justice, that's for sure. So my instinct was he wanted to make these commitments, but I think he was told no. I don't know that, but I'm pretty sure, well, I can't say. But I think he was told no by the White House. And this raises a much bigger concern about this nominee. And Mr. President, my good friend, the esteemed senator from West Virginia, Senator Capito, was on the floor earlier. She also sits on the EPW committee. She's the ranking member on the committee. And she gave a really important speech on why she also voted no for Mr. Regan. And I think she had the same feeling I did. Knows his issues, qualified, cares about different state challenges. But she raised a concern that I want to reiterate, because I think it's going to be a really big concern, and I think it's going to come to a head here soon. And that's this. There is concern. It's not just among Republican senators. It's all over the press. She cited it. That Mr. Regan, who's now the EPA administrator, might not be the person in charge of the EPA. Now, he's Senate confirmed. He's the one who has to come before the Congress for hearings, for oversight. But what are we talking about here? Well, Mr. President, the former EPA administrator, Gina McCarthy, is in the White House. She's out talking to the press all the time. She's an unaccountable czar on these issues, working behind the scenes, and actually not even behind the scenes. She was recently quoting about herself, saying she's the orchestra leader of all of these issues. Well, wait, what about the EPA administrator? I thought he was the Senate-confirmed person nominated by the president. Big concern that he's not going to have the authority or the decision-making capacity and is going to be told what to do by a shadow EPA working out of the White House run by Gina McCarthy. That's not just me. That's just not Senator Capito. That's all over the press. Read it. Inside EPA. She was quoting from that. Senator Capito was. No transparency there. All these previous Obama administration EPA alumni in the White House running it. By the way, if I'm the new EPA administrator, Mr. Regan, I wouldn't want that notion out there. But with all due respect, sir, and again, congratulations, it's out there. And you need to tamp this down, because it's going to come to a head. Look, my state did not fare well under the Gina McCarthy EPA. There's a long list. Waters of the U.S. I won't get into the details. Disrespect to my constituents. Armed EPA officials, body armor, rifles, going after gold miners, placer miners in Alaska because they thought they were violating the Clean Water Act. No kidding. Read about it. Chicken, Alaska. Go Google that. We were not big fans. So I believe Mr. Regan wants to work with Alaskans. I believe he understands the concept of cooperative federalism on these environmental issues. I don't believe he would authorize armed guards to terrify small placer miners in interior Alaska the way the previous administrator, McCarthy, did, and talk to the press in a blatantly disrespectful way to my fellow Alaskans. Shameful in my view. But this issue is going to come to a head. Who's in charge? Regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you voted for the EPA administrator, if you didn't, we want him in charge because he's the Senate-confirmed official nominated by the president, not an unelected official in the White House who I guarantee you wouldn't have been able to get confirmed. So it's going to be a challenge. And it's not just Gina McCarthy. We had an EPW hearing today, and I raised the issue of the other czar, John Kerry. Again, former senator, but he's not confirmed. He hasn't been appointed to a Senate-confirmed job. He and the president are at loggerheads on a really big issue. President Biden, President of the United States, recently in a meeting reported by the press with labor leaders said, I'm all in on natural gas. That's important. That's going to be a huge issue for our environment, for workers. The President of the United States said that. I'm all in on natural gas. To the men and women who build pipelines. He told them that recently in a White House meeting. He's the President of the United States. Now, John Kerry I think some people think he's president of the world. He's flying around on his airplane right now. He's telling people he's not for natural gas. Well, I wonder who's going to win that debate. But this goes to this issue, Mr. President. These are going to come to a head. Who's in charge here? President of the United States, President of the world on natural gas? I hope it's the President of the United States, because natural gas is going to be key for our workers, for our environment, for our national security. And at the EPA level, who's in charge? Mr. Regan? I hope so. Or Gina McCarthy? It's looking more and more like she's in charge. And so that's why a number of us, despite being impressed, wanting to work with the new EPA administrator, voted no. And I certainly hope that the unaccountable team of McCarthy and Kerry in the White House are not going to be running the policy. It's going to be the people who are actually confirmed by the U.S. Senate, because that's the way our system of government is supposed to work. So, Mr. President, for those reasons, although I again want to congratulate Mr. Regan, I respectfully decline to support his nomination, and we'll see. We'll see who's going to be ultimately in charge. I want to work with him and his team. These issues are so important in my state. I want him to help convince others in the Biden White House for the ceasefire that my constituents need. We need to get to work. And I'm hoping he's going to be a constructive partner in that regard.